could deceive to release them. Fuel asks Casserole if they will still send the bandits to the city of Rites, and Casserole says yes. He says that is the only way the king of the Rites can maintain his pride and not feel disappointed that he found it difficult to defeat the bandits that have attacked his city. Fuel also asks him what they will get in return for the favor, and he says they will have to discuss what will be profitable. They take all the bandits to the prison and tie them to the woods around them, and also put security at the gate to secure the bandits and ensure they don't escape. As it is known that rewards are the greatest motivation to do something, Casserole decides to reward everyone who has contributed one way or the other towards the win. He calls the villagers together and calls the first person Glackage. He gives Glackage his rewards and also calls the two little kids, Mark and Lumi, who have helped Pastry in laying the first ambush in the war. The kids move forward, although they wonder why Casserole has called them together and not separately. Casserole tells them he is proud of them and that they will be a great addition to society. As a reward for their great work, he gives them a sword and barley barn. The kids are so excited. They struggle to carry their gifts home, and on their way, Mark asks Lumi if he knew they would be so great during the battle. They are also so proud of themselves, and they are happy that they have gotten swords for themselves. They hope that one day they will grow up to be helpful to the next lord of their city, Pastry. They wish to become Pastry's retainers in the future and help him tremendously. Pastry passes around them, and he sees them struggling to carry their gifts. He goes to help them carry it, and they all lift it to Mark's house. Mark enters the house happily and screams to tell his family that he did so well during the war that the Lord rewarded him with a sword and grains. His mother is more excited that he has returned home alive from that scary battle. She hugs him passionately and tells him she is really scared on his behalf. His sister is also happy. They say they are proud of him, and they know he will do so well. His mother tells him she is proud of him, and she also asks Pastry if her son wasn't in much trouble during the fight. Pastry tells her that Mark was diligent and he was part of the reasons they won the fight, which makes his mother more proud of him. They need to go to Lumi's house too, so they leave Mark's house. When they arrive at Lumi's house, her grandfather hugs her so passionately that she almost squeezes her out of her clothes. She screams at her grandfather that he is squeezing her out. She shows her grandfather the rewards she got from the battles, and her grandfather is so excited and happy for her. He tells her he knows that she is a diligent child, and he knows she wouldn't have disappointed them. Her grandfather also greets Pastry. Later, the men in the village decide to celebrate their win. They come to Lumi's house with their wines and alcohol. As they enter the house, they ask Lumi if her father is back home. But he tells them her father has gone to meet Mark's father, and he says that he has something important to do there. The men decide that his absence if her father wouldn't stop them from enjoying themselves in celebration of their win. They enter the house, and they start serving the wine. They notice that Pastry is also there, and they ask him to also join them in the celebration. Mark asks the adults to give them alcohol, too, but they refuse, saying that the little ones would only take milk. They serve the kids milk and the adults drinks. They all drink, and as the men say they were shocked when they witnessed the first ambush led by Pastry with the little kids. They say that the ambush was coordinated and one of the reasons they could win the fight. They say they never thought Mark and Lumi, no nuisance in the community, could be that useful during the battle, and say that their city will be in great hands in the future. On the other hand, Pastry is thinking about his apple pie, which he has decided that he is going to make. He thinks of all his ingredients and how he will get them in that city, including cinnamon. Mark and Lumi also leave the adults. They go outside to play, and Mark says he never thought there would be a day when the adults would commend them that much, and says all they have been used to is insults and abuse because of their attitudes, so hearing little compliments here and there isn't a bad idea. Lumi tells him that he is the only one that is a nuisance and not her. As they play and talk, Mark asks Lumi if he knows where the bandits are kept, and Lumi tells him they are in prison. Mark says that as the future retainers of the kingdom, the responsibility of guarding the prisoners should be their own, so they should go and check up on the prisoners. Lumi also agrees with him, and they leave for the prison. At the prison, they meet the guards, and they try to convince the guards to allow them in. The guards refuse, and they angrily leave. As Lumi leaves peacefully, Mark drags her back, saying he has a suggestion. He takes some stones from the floor and throws them toward the other side of the prison. The guards hear the sounds and assume something is wrong, so they go to leave there. As they leave, Mark and Lumi enter the prison. They walk around and see the bandit's head, who speaks to Mark. He asks him if he is the sword's owner by his side, and Mark tells him the sword was given to him as a reward. The bandit tells Mark that the sword belongs to him, and he knows that he will die soon and be beheaded, so before he dies, he would like to do a good deed by teaching Mark how to use the sword. Lumi begs Mark not to listen to the man, but Mark refuses and brings out the sword. The bandit tells him that if he teaches him how to use it, he can use magic. Mark is so excited about that because he wants to use magic like pastry. The man tells there is a chant that should be said on the sword to bring out the magic, and no other person can hear it, so Mark should come nearer. Before Mark gets there, the man loses his rope and he kicks Mark. He takes the sword and hits Lumi with it. Lumi falls and starts bleeding. The guards return, and the man holds Mark at ransom, saying he will kill him if they come near him. Another villager reports the incident to the other villagers, who come there immediately. The bandit takes a horse and climbs on it with Mark in his hand and rides away. Pastry arrives. He enters the prison and sees injured Lumi. He tells them to treat her and says they should ensure they stop the injury without considering the scar it will show on her body. He goes out and asks the men where the bandit has passed. They tell him he has gone toward the east, and Pastry takes the horse to follow him. On his way, he thinks that the trap they have left around the east is still there and says that if the trap stops the bandit, he will try to take a small injury to replicate the injury on the bandit. News of what has happened gets to Casserole. He asks where his son is, and they tell him that Pastry has followed the bandit. He immediately stands up to chase them, but Fuel tells him to stop and says he will go instead. Fuel insists that if the people hear that a bandit has escaped, they will be anxious and afraid, and it is Casserole's role to keep them calm, and he can only do that if he is there. Fuel asks for another villager, and they search for the two boys. Indeed, the bandit's horse falls when he steps on the trap. As he falls, Pastry arrives, and Mark runs behind Pastry. Pastry brings out his sword, and the bandit asks why he is always disturbing his plans. He asks if it is also Pastry that put the trap there. He wonders if Pastry wants to fight him, and he goes to fight. The fight is tough because the bandit knows Pastry can replicate any wound, so he plans to kill Pastry with a single strike. As the fight gets tougher, Mark tells Pastry to leave and that his life isn't worth it, but Pastry reminds him that he is his lieutenant and must be alive. The bandit breaks Pastry's sword and attempts to hit Pastry, and Pastry screams. Fuel arrives and can't find the boys. He sees Pastry's broken sword, assumes the boy is dead, and takes the sword to break the bad news to Casserole and Agnes, only to see Pastry at home sitting on Agnes's leg. He is shocked because he couldn't have missed Pastry on the way. He asks Casserole how Pastry could have gotten home that early, reluctantly. Pastry confesses that he replicated his father's teleportation skills. Casserole warns him never to use the skills in front of anyone again, and that he shouldn't use magic in battles because although he is lucky that time, he may teleport under a rock next time. He meets with Fuel expressing his concerns that the bandit may reveal what he has seen Pastry use, and if others know Pastry can recreate people's magic, they will take him as a threat. The following day, Mark sits sadly. Pastry comes to meet him, asking if he wants to visit Lumi, but Mark says he feels ashamed. Pastry tells him all he has to do is say sorry, so they go there together. Pastry goes to the kitchen to make banka pie while Mark apologizes to Lumi, who forgives him immediately and says it's not his fault. Pastry brings the pie, and they enjoy it. He gives them a sour banka, and they scream that it is sour. He explains to them that bankas can be sour or sweet, and it takes a special skill to mix it perfectly. He tells Mark that just like banka, he also has his excellent skill and he should find it if he wants to be his lieutenant. Mark appreciates him. Later, Glackage, Lumi's father, arrives and gets angry at Mark for injuring his daughter. He says Mark has to marry Lumi because of that, and they all laugh and eat the banka pie. Seeing how happy they are, Pastry determines that he will make people more happy by creating a sweet land. In the end, the Princess of Rites finds out that the people of Mordon Field defeated the bandits and says it will be a difficult negotiation.